On this week's episode of Where We Are, we'll discuss the Tennessee Three, the need for chaos voter. And I'm also going to prod Melissa to share a theory she shared with me that I think is spot on. You're listening to Where We Are.
Hello, Where We Are listeners. If you're a longtime fan of this podcast or you're just joining us for the first time today, we want to tell you more about our podcast platform called Spotify for Podcasters. We've been using this platform for over a year and it's been easy to use and new features are added all the time. You can record and edit podcasts from your phone or computer, you don't need anything fancy, and you don't need previous podcast experience. When you hit publish, you will distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify if that's your kind of thing. And with Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. But here's the thing, you can earn money, but it's a free platform. There's no catch. If you're curious or want to see what it's all about, download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
You're listening to Where We Are. We are the Wares. I'm Michael.
I'm Melissa.
And Melissa, we are recording this on the evening of Easter Sunday. He is risen. Happy Resurrection Sunday to folks. We decided to let y'all go to church in the morning instead of staying home and listening to Where We Are. So we'll release this episode on Monday. Our apologies if you were waiting for it, but we figured it would be best to release on Monday. Melissa, we had a pretty good Easter for me being laid up with this leg. We had a great dinner.
Yeah,
had a friend over.
Yeah, she and we made cacio e pepe focaccia. It was really good. The focaccia turned out really well. It's my first time ever making focaccia, and I guess it was my friend Catherine, who makes bread a bit more often than I do, so I was pretty proud.
It was amazing, yeah.
Yeah, no, and then we made a pasta. Yeah, and we went to church in the morning, and Alara has a very, very bad ear infection again.
She does, a poor sweetheart.
And so we left church early. I couldn't even get communion because she was just, I could see that she was in pain. And so we get home, and, I'm getting increasingly frustrated because I know that she's in pain. And we have these little chewable tablets now for whether it's ibuprofen or acetaminophen. And I go to Michael, I bring her upstairs, I hand him the little tablet of Tylenol, and I go, she really needs to take this because she's in a lot of pain and she'll feel so much better when she has this. Because, of course, she started on a round of antibiotics, but they haven't been going that long to actually truly work. And I proceed to go downstairs, and I just hear Michael negotiating with her for about 10 minutes going, Alara, you really need to take this. It's good for you. It'll help you feel better. I really need you to do this. And she's just turned 2. She's 2-year-old. So he's negotiating with a toddler. And then all of a sudden I get a text from him saying she took the Tylenol.
What can I say?
This man convinced a 2-year-old, a very obstinate 2-year-old, who will not take medicine from her mother, like any form of medicine, whether it's her antibiotic or a pain reliever, anything. And this man got her to take this Tylenol. And then, when I wanted to give her one more dose for the nighttime for her going down to bed, I wanted her to take some ibuprofen this time, so I knew that she'd get a good night's sleep. I handed it to her, and she proceeds to take it from my hand and throws it across the room. I go and pick it up. I bring it upstairs to Michael, and I go, she's refusing to take this from me again. He looks at her in the eyes, puts it in her hand, and goes, you need to take this. She looks at it and goes, candy, and pops it into her mouth and starts chewing.
Look, first of all, me and my lot, we got a special connection. Second of all, I'm still providing value to this household, even though I've been laid up for like 3.5
Thank
weeks.
God.
Still
I need
providing
help. I'm in
value.
the trenches.
Still making a contribution. And so, there are some things I can't do, like walk or put the girls to bed or cook, but I can negotiate with the toddler and say very sweet things to her and then give her medicine in hopes that she obliges, which she did. It was like, for it to happen in front of you, it was like one of the proudest moments I've had as a father, that we just had a communication and she was vibing with me, even though she's dealing with so much pain.
Yeah, she took that candy immediately. That baby took that candy immediately.
She trusts me. I said, baby, this is for your own good. And she was like, okay, daddy. So big Easter win. What do you say? Should we get to so there's a honest, actually, I'm not going to say I was about to say we have another sort of lighthearted item, but it's not. I think it's legit. I think Amanda Mull should write the piece on this. Mm-hmm. If you don't, but we'll save it. You should Substack it. By the way, that's a whole other topic we could discuss. All the Substack drama. But let's save that. I want to get to some of the news. Just before we jump in, I do just want to say, my goodness, and if you've been listening to the Morning Five, you probably picked up on this. The foreign policy news that is coming over the transom is just wild. So we're probably going to do a foreign policy episode, a sort of global survey in the coming weeks, just because I think it's a really significant time. I think that within the next 6 months, I think we're going to see something develop on the global stage that takes over the news in a way similar to Russia invading Ukraine. Like, I just think there is so much percolating that in the next 6 months, I would not be surprised to see. It may just be another major spark with Russia, but you look at what's happening in China, you look at developments with Iran and Israel, and there's just a lot happening.
The Yemen war may have just gotten a ceasefire.
That's right.
Which is just wild.
You look at Yemen. You look at Macron went to China, and how France is moving, even as Macron navigates his own domestic crisis.
China is the one who brokered the ceasefire mainly for
That's
Yemen.
exactly right. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. So we'll try and cover a lot of that in greater depth. But for this episode, we want to focus domestically, and we'll start with the Tennessee Three.
Yep.
Do you want to offer an overview, or should I?
Sure, I can offer an overview.
Please.
So, two lawmakers for Tennessee were expelled. There was a vote held this past Thursday, April 6th, which resulted in Justin Jones and Justin Pearson being expelled from the Tennessee State House of Representatives. With a third Democrat, Gloria Johnson, she kept her seat by one vote. Now, why was a vote even brought to the table? How could they have been expelled? Well, on March 30th, a lot of protesters gathered at Tennessee's state capitol, which is in Nashville,
in the wake of the shooting
at Covenant, calling for tighter gun control laws. And so, protesters were in the hallways, in the galleries of the House and Senate chambers, chanting, shouting, protesting. And on the House floor, the three representatives Jones, Pearson, and Johnson, they brought the proceedings to a halt, and they
Using a blowhorn.
They got on a bullhorn, and there was there was a video filmed by a Republican on the House floor during the event, and it showed the three speaking on the floor, with everybody protesting in the background. And so the Republicans hold a very large majority of seats. So then they pledged a rapid response. So they brought, this expelling to a vote. And now Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, they've been expelled, but now it's up to local councils, that are related to, where their constituency is. They will now have to decide themselves, these councils, of whether or not both Jones and Pearson can actually return to their seats or not, or whether or not they will replace Jones and Pearson with somebody else, and then wait for an election, which isn't too far away apparently. So this obviously set so many things running, set many people on fire. Just the president, the White House has invited Jones and Pearson to the White House.
Vice President Harris already visited with them.
Yes.
In the state on Friday.
Yep, that is right. And so, you have many. I mean, my main question, Michael, that I want to discuss with you, because I'm mulling this over myself over the past few days since this happened, is, does this set a precedent for, other chambers,
yes.
other states?
Yes.
Is this an undemocratic move? Sorry.
Yes.
How is it an undemocratic move? Will Pearson and Jones return to their seat? Did all these Republicans make this vote knowing that, their localities will actually put them back, and we're just, this will just be a major show, a major slap on the wrist? Is there a risk for either of them to not be replaced? Obviously those are the major questions.
Yeah. Okay, so this is one of those stories, and there are many of them in politics, where so much rides on where you start the story.
Mm-hmm.
If you start the story with the members, with Pearson and Jones being expelled, then you go, what an egregious act.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know much else about why it happened,
mm-hmm.
then there are some pretty strident stories that you could tell about why they were expelled, some of which may have merit, by the way. Now, Republicans in the state want to start the story elsewhere. They want to start the story not too far back, because you go too far back and there are some real problems. But they want to start the story with the legislative session being interrupted,
mm-hmm.
brought to a halt,
mm-hmm.
the democratic process
mm-hmm.
of the business of the Tennessee Senate being brought to a halt,
mm-hmm.
unapologetically by Jones and Pearson. I've read reports that at some point Johnson said that she would have acted differently or regretted it or does not think she should do it in the future. But Republicans are in the state are saying, they intentionally, knowingly violated the rules of this body. They say that they're glad that they did it. And so the only expelling them from this body is a reciprocal sort of response to their dishonoring the body. Now, the problem, there are a lot of problems with that. To put my cards on the table, I think that what they did deserve to censure. I think that that would have been an appropriate response from a Republican legislature to censure all three of those members for knowingly, outside of procedure, bringing the business of the legislature to a halt. The problem is they didn't censure. They expelled two of the members from their seats, which is such an extraordinary overreaction, particularly given the context of what they were protesting about. I mean, it's politically stupid, and we'll talk about that. But just in terms of collegiality and the idea that I'll accept the argument that a certain level of disrespect, the Democratic members would say that it was warranted, or perhaps they would say, it wasn't against the Republicans in control of the Senate, but on behalf of the protesters who were protesting and making sure that they were being heard. Such an overreaction to the extent that it becomes hard to talk about them interrupting the session with a bullhorn and all that, because the response is so egregious. That's the more immediate sort of frankly, like, anti-democratic response, even though it happened through, there was a vote on it, and that way it was democratic. But to strip those constituents of representation in the body is a real problem. On the political side, it's a problem because no one knew who these folks were, and you just turned them into folk heroes. Jones and Pearson were on Meet the Press this morning on Sunday. They're all over the TV. There are obvious problems, at least in terms of optics. I would say substantively, with the fact that they expelled the two young black members and not the woman, for whatever explanations they have. Just as politicians, there should have been some thought as to the message that would send, and the fact that there wasn't that thought, or they didn't heed those thoughts, is an indication all on its own of sort of what the priorities were, who they're playing to, who they think they represent, etc., etc. And so that's a problem. Just the last thing I'll say here, Melissa, is right. I think it's important to go even further back, which is to say the reason why Pearson, Jones, and Johnson were felt justified. And again, that's not to say that they were, but to say that they felt justified, is because they really couldn't, in a reasonable way, have the voices of their constituents heard reasonably, because the Republicans in the Tennessee legislature have so gerrymandered, have so rigged the rules of that state legislature that it is extremely difficult for Democrats to even think about approaching a majority in that body the way that they have. You look at the map, for instance, of like how Nashville is split up, and these are maps designed to by geography limit Democrats' access to seats in the legislature. And so that, like, you could go back into all of that history and understand why even if you, and again, I'll say I think it was wrong to bring the business of the Tennessee State Senate to a halt outside of procedure in that way. But you can understand why such actions were taken, given how the deck is stacked against Democrats and the constituencies that they represent in the body in ways that aren't just reducible to the fact that Tennessee is a majority Republican state.
Yeah, it obviously, it will be very interesting to see if both legislators are restored by their localities, and if not, what happens, and the ramifications that will continue to follow even if they are restored, and then obviously, especially if they aren't restored, when it comes to like the obviously the talks around the undemocratic sort of feeling process, whatever, of the entire thing. But it's it's just very interesting to me that after such a horrific shooting, that a power move like this would be taken when you do have such a giant majority sort of thing. Like, it's just politically, it just doesn't make a terrible amount of sense to me. But we'll end that discussion there.
Well, you raised something that I didn't address, which is, and I think this might be one of the more, one of the ways in which the events of the last week have a longer tail than people might suspect. Obviously, we need to track whether Jones and Pearson, I expect them to be reappointed.
Right? Yeah.
But you raised the very good point of, we're in this environment on not just policy issues, but on these sort of these acts of antagonism of sort of liberal states, progressive states responding to conservative states, and vice versa. And yes, it sets a terrible precedent. You're now going to have, like, I don't think it was a demand rising up from constituencies to invoke the legislative procedure to expel those members. Like, honestly, I would be surprised if a majority of voters knew that you could expel members by a vote. So this was something designed by the Republican legislators in the Tennessee GOP. The problem is, in different states will have different rules, but the problem, I mean, it really doesn't matter. The problem is that now you're going to have voters saying, this member said something that was offensive, expel them. Or this member of this state legislative body is the only thing standing between what we want getting done. Just expel them. We'll deal with the repercussions after. And so, yes, Melissa, I just think it bodes really ill. I wish that there were statesmen, frankly, in the Tennessee State Senate who considered, who were able to balance what they felt as their duty to, let's frame it in like the best way possible, their duty to sort of uphold the decorum and the procedures of the state, of the legislative body, with the shockwaves this would send both in their state and nationally. So yeah, I am concerned about that for sure.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
All right, moving on, Melissa.
Yes.
Speaking of chaos, and it is chaotic, what is the need for chaos voter?
Yeah, so I caught wind of this study that was published on February 17th of this year, so just, a couple months ago, by 3 academics. 2 of them are from University of Aarhus, and a third from Sciences Po that's in Paris. So these European researchers who decided to look at 8 different studies of individuals living across the United States and show about the motivations and the motivators behind something called the need for chaos voter. And a need for chaos voter, they want to circulate hostile political information in order to unleash chaos or to burn down the entire political order or the entire political system, in the hope that they gain status through that process by trying to bring down that political order. And this study, it ran like 6 or 7 different tests from these 8 other studies to find out that yes, these need for chaos voters do actually exist for the idea of chaos. Like the chaos is the motivation and not just partisanship, which that was the most interesting conclusion that I found from this study, because like my brain would automatically say in a time of hyperpolarization, you would think that like a need for chaos voters is not, at least very, fairly motivated by their whatever partisan views that they hold, that's why they want to go, sow this chaos, spread hostile political information. And this study through these various tests shows that even after accounting for partisan motivations, that these voters are motivated to share these types of political rumors, to gather others around them in sort of like spreading and misinformation and things like that, for the idea that they actually want to sow chaos and take down the political system. And at a time when, in a separate study from Yale, like a year and a half ago, Yale, which around outrage online and how outrage is actually very, very appealing to people, and that's like the sort of motivator for how people communicate with one another on social media and online, that rage is actually like one of the biggest sort of emotions that you can find in our sort of political discourse, and it's social media just sort of sows that rage. So I think about that kind of study from Yale, and then I think about this study about that there's a need for chaos voter out there. It's not like they're like in the hundreds of thousands, but there are enough. And this study very, very rightly says,
oh well, yeah, I would imagine at the national level, how do the researchers suggest what percentage of voters fall in this category?
Not from what I was reading, because they go through, like the literature review, because they reviewed 8 different studies on these need for chaos voters. So I'm thinking that I'd probably need to dig into one of those studies probably to find an answer like that.
Yeah.
With the defining of what is actually a need for chaos voter, because that's what these other studies do. But
the framework is an interesting one to think about. The sort of category.
Yes, because you think about, like, again, another piece of research, which I know that we've talked about on this podcast, the More in Common research, where they came up with the sort of typologies of where people fit, like where do Americans fit into when it comes to whether they're liberal or conservative, and it's the fringes who actually, which are very small, like 5 to 7% on either side, actually control a lot of the the narratives and the ideology and what we're actually conversing about day in, day out. I think of a study like that from More in Common, then I think about this need for chaos voter, and I'd kind of want to ask them, could you throw this in now that we have quite a few studies that are showing that we've got a pretty good grasp that these voters do in fact exist? Can we throw that into the mix and see what it does? Because I just wanted to finish my the one thought. These researchers for this study do point out that in a time of social media where information can spread so fast, all you have to do is sow an idea, find others around you that you know would be obviously vulnerable to that kind of information or vulnerable to that idea, and you can... I mean, obviously, we have Q, like we have QAnon, like we have things. I don't know if QAnon would be termed a chaos voter because we don't actually know who QAnon is, but I think who and or what QAnon is. I have to say that these days with AI, ChatGPT, but
wait, you can't just like throw out the theory that QAnon is and always has been artificial intelligence and like move on.
Have you seen ChatGPT? Have you seen the articles that ChatGPT can lie?
Oh, that's very funny. Okay, proceed.
Anyway,
proceed.
Sorry, I was like, I'll take my tinfoil hat off. No, I just want to end it there that with social media, the need for a chaos voter is more concerning than ever, even if there might be an idea that a need for chaos voter has existed for a long time, maybe decades. So now it's the power that they hold and the scariness around it is amplified because of social media.
Yeah. So one of the things I thought looking at this research is, it's like I felt like I've read and heard of other ways of describing a similar set of voters.
Me too.
And that these researchers made a choice in just how they charge the categorization. I don't think it all reduces down to, because I do think they're actually they're trying to get to a narrower set. But like, it does remind me of just like thinking about like low information, highly engaged, anti-establishment, sort of like those are the characteristics of this set, at least as I sort of understand it. And those are, of course, less charged ways of describing them than that they need chaos. Now, interestingly, at the end of the research, the researchers say the temptation may be to, just think about how you could work against these voters. But it's important, like, you hear their concerns. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I might start with not calling them need for chaos. But I'm not sure that the framing, if that's what you want, which is to like, you want politicians and like the body politic to like try and attend to some of the concerns that these voters have, the disenfranchisement they feel, then I don't think need for chaos voters necessarily advances that. So that would be sort of one thing to say. Yeah.
And you've just mentioned at the very end of the research about how to actually like sort of engage or get through to beyond understanding, which studies like this are trying to understand, but the sort of like how do you actually stop various agents of chaos in the system? And I kind of was scratching my head and going, there are studies about, obviously, again, like I already mentioned, about partisans. People are hyper-partisan who want to spread hostile political rumors, that it's their partisanship that motivates them. I was thinking, like, that conversation is already difficult enough when it comes to talking to someone who is hyper-partisan around, like, having a normal discussion, one that's back and forth, fair, whatever. But a need for chaos, that just seems so basic instinct human almost, that it's the type of motivation that I feel like, how would you even go about trying to converse or convince or not just even seeing their point of view would seem wild to me, because I don't have a need for chaos.
Yeah, right. Yes.
But I do know what partisan motivations feel like, because there are certain issues in which I am absolutely very partisan on, and like I freely admit when I am, especially when you and I are discussing on the podcast, so that our listeners know, like, you know what, I absolutely know that I'm very like to the left on this, or, you know, whatever sort of issue it is. Like, I understand that motivation on certain set of issues, but a need for chaos, oh man, just a basic understanding to then you kind of need that to even start a conversation or to even move into like reconciliation. I don't know.
Yes.
You know?
So I think it's probably destructive to our politics if we had both politicians and just average people thinking, does this person fit in the need for chaos box,
no,
or does that person?
Absolutely.
On the other hand, personally, gosh, haven't you been in conversations with people in your life who you just go, oh, we are not having a rational conversation here.
Yeah.
And they seem to know that what they're saying is not true. They just get, consciously or subconsciously, they're just getting a kick out of pressing buttons and sort of being against the grain or saying the controversial thing. And so from that perspective, the sort of more passive terms, or the sort of the attempt to put every voter in this hyper rational, they're responding to the circumstances of their life sort of box. No, just like out of personal experience, there are people, because they think politics is a game, and because they just, and you know, I do think it is, they don't see how politics is working for them. Their encounters with government seem to work against their interests as opposed to for, but also like it's about getting like personal satisfaction out of the exchange, as opposed to being like politics is a forum for public service. And you know how like I know so many people in my life who are like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then because the issue, the 2020 study that you love in terms of its usefulness for explaining our politics on political sectarianism, you bring that into this discussion.
Well, that's going to be in the book. Let's not open up that present too early. But I think, to your point, I'm glad you raised it. I think that strikes the perfect balance between sort of not loading too much emotional weight like Need for Chaos voter does, and not too much negative connotation. While also not sort of bending over backwards to try and rationalize the irrational. But there'll be more than enough time to talk about that. But Melissa,
rationality, it would be such a great discussion about this, because, you know,
I get in very heated debates about it, and it depends on the hat I'm wearing, which is, it really bothers me when politicians and like sort of pundits sort of rationalize actual decision making in government on the basis that voters are irrational. Because I just think public servants, they can't respond to their constituents generally as if voters are irrational. The whole system of self-governance falls to pieces if that's how you operate.
No,
but if I'm wearing the hat where it's like, yeah, I've had conversations with voters who are not thinking about who are not thinking rationally, who don't care to think rationally when it comes to politics, then I'm like, you know, then I'm.
But here's the interesting thing, because I completely agree with you, especially for thinking more along like the various, again, like you're saying, like the conversations you've had in life with folks who like you can start to tell like this is a button pushing, like that kind of thing. But this study, strangely, because they put, they take these 8 other studies, and the need for chaos voter is being, obviously slowly cultivated and defined, and the motivations are what this study is about. It makes this whole category of voter seem completely rational because there is an explanation. Like there's an explanation of motivation. So isn't that so interesting that it gives a rationality to all of it?
I'm in a way, but
I think enough in a way that it's important to note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a whole other kettle of fish.
You're winning me over with your insistence.
Okay.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. Happens all the time.
Yeah. So there are 2 more topics. One, just quickly, would urge you to go to reclaiminghope.substack.com, where you will read my thoughts on the Trump arraignment. So we're not going in depth about that on the show today, but I wrote an essay on it. So would urge you to go to reclaiminghope.substack.com. Here, read my thoughts on that. And while you're there, leave us a comment, become a paid subscriber, click around the website, spend some time there. Don't just read my essay. There's a lot you could do on the Substack, including a new notes feature, Twitter thing.
Twitter 2.0.
Yeah.
It's very cool. We've already been using it. I like it a lot. It's nice.
Yeah. Okay. Here's where I want to close, Melissa, which is we were watching TikToks.
As we do.
And I almost want to make up a different story than what happened, because I actually think that I understand the concerns around this, but the video that prompted our conversation was, there's a video about, there's a huge debate on TikTok and in real life about whether you should allow kids to do sleepovers.
Yeah.
And I think that's a legitimate debate, all that. But it got us talking, and you said something that I thought was brilliant and spot on. What was it, Melissa?
Because I see it again and again and again. So I've brought this up. I've tweeted this out before where, I still get these TikToks, and probably because I stopped, because I just have to go, oh my goodness, because I like seeing the comments, how many likes it gets, where it says, don't risk the skip of, skipping over this TikTok because, something good will happen to you in the next 7 minutes kind of thing. And I go, this is literally just chainmail, but for Gen Z, the type of chainmail that we all know that Gen X and baby boomers had to deal with when chainmail was a thing, and people started figuring out, wait, there's like a whole catch to this.
Okay, that's fine, but get to your really good point.
No.
Get to the insightful point.
Come on, dude. I'm building up to it, my guy. It's like I'm a performing monkey. Anyways.
Yep.
And so, with a story like this, I think that TikTok is the kind of platform for millennials and Gen Z, the way that local news has been for, again, the baby boomer generation. And that when certain issues are harped on, or you're told that they're a huge issue, or, hundreds of children are kidnapped daily.
Yes.
You get a generation of parents, baby boomers, who think that there are hundreds of children being abducted on the daily in the United States, and therefore obviously start to parent in that way. And we all know what I'm talking about, the various steps that, your parents or grandparents, however you're related to the generations that heard that over and over again on the local news. TikTok is the same way for millennials and Gen Z, in that it's the incubator.
And it's not just fears about kids. It's here's the thing that you're not supposed to eat. Here's the product you're not supposed to use. Here's the thing that will kill you.
Here's what the government isn't telling you.
Here's what the government isn't telling you.
Here's what's not on the news that the mainstream news doesn't want you to know. yeah, TikTok is that new incubator of those kinds of narratives, and they blow them up in a way because you see all the likes, you see all the comments. Plus, it's actually even worse because you used to, a baby boomer or the generations before them would watch the local news, and maybe you discuss it at the dinner table, maybe you discuss it with your neighbor next door or the group of friends that you have. But it's not like you knew 722,000 people had liked it and there were 6,743 comments.
This is so smart. This is such a smart insight, right? Which is the hubris, the presentism of, well, we're not dumb and gullible.
Yeah.
Like,
that's why I started off the chainmail thing.
Because, like, this isn't like local news. This isn't like neighborhood chatter. I'm the master of my feed. Like, I'm getting information directly, and I'm sifting through it. Like, I'm being discerning. I'm being discerning. I have access to all this information, and I don't believe everything. I apply my analysis to it, and it's like the world is open to me. Not like those boomers who would like hear something at the corner store and take it as gospel, or, or hear on the local news that something was happening and blow it out of proportion. But like, guess what? It turns out we're not as great as discerning a TikTok feed and the proportionality of different bits of advice and tips and the motivation behind it as we think we are.
I started off with that chainmail thing of like the TikToks that say, don't risk the skip, something good will happen to you in the next 7 minutes if you share this and like this and follow this account. I'm like, the channels are different, but the human behavior is the same.
Totally.
And
So chew on that.
Yeah.
I have been for the last few days. Maybe listeners will be like, I've already thought about it. And if so, good for you. That's why we're honored to have you as a listener.
Yeah.
Because you think of these things ahead of us. But I thought it was worth sharing. We'd love to hear thoughts about Melissa's theory over social or email us. But Melissa, I think that's all we have for this week's episode. We're going to try and get through another week. I'm not walking yet. I probably won't walk by the time of next episode, but I feel my leg getting stronger. The bones are fusing, and I'm well on my way, and so are you, dear. All right.
I can't wait till you can walk Peg Leg Joe.
I know. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Where We Are. Happy Easter. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. And we'll be back with the Morning Five on Tuesday. So we're basically just kind of pushing things back this week. Until then.
Bye.
It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up.